Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, friends, readers, listeners, and viewers. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is FallenAngels.tv, and we've got quite an interesting show lined up for you tonight. I'm going to bring forth in this single show together a collection, many collections actually. I'm going to tell you about the individual books that make up these various collections, the original canon, the books that have been stripped out, the apocryphal text, the pseudepigraphal text. We'll go into even the forbidden books of the Bible, the forgotten books of Eden. But I'm going to start with a couple of questions and an email that two people recently have just sent to me, because I think these questions will help tie together some loose ends for a lot of people, especially for new listeners that have not, gone through the archives and listened to Oh goodness, the vast amount of information we've put out there on the various different things, because we covered so many different things here, and it's not just about Cain or predestination or the giants or Nephilim or anything. We try to cover everything, Atlantis, the New World Order, the Illuminati, the bloodlines, the fallen angels, the reptilian, everything. We try to summarize it all into summation so that you can understand and piece together the truth that really parades behind everything. And once you have, it's almost like that movie they made, I believe it's called They Live. And this one guy, when he put on these sunglasses, he was able to see through the facade of the fallen angels and the guys that they wear as, angels parading in human flesh form and possessing bodies and possessing, the body as a vehicle to kind of work through in this dimension, almost like as a pseudo armor. And it's the same for us. It really is. So I want to share this with you. This is from Jared. He says, I'm hoping you could help me out with the question that I've been stuck on. I'm struggling a little to make the connection between the Anunnaki's primitive worker and the modern human. You had a show a few months ago where you mentioned that Adam just popped up on the scene one day, and I believe the story went something like the Anunnaki came back to check on the creature, and they noticed that he was obviously different from the primitive worker, and his intelligence even shocked and impressed the Anunnaki. Essentially, my question is, did the primitive worker evolve into modern humanity? Or did the Lord secretly plant Adam, and the Anunnaki assumed that he evolved from their creature? In other words, did the Lord use the mechanics of evolution to create Adam from the creature, or did he literally pile up mud and commanded Adam to walk out of it? Okay, this is a very good question, and this actually will lead into, because I cover this in my book in full detail, and so you'll get the full answer there, but just to kind of summarize the answer for you here. The primitive worker, as described, and I'm doing a show on this next Saturday to give you a little bit more explanation and to actually bring in the quoted text and to cover this in a little bit more detail. And if you have questions between now and then, of course, just send them to me at fallenangels.tv, www.fallenangels.tv. I'm the webmaster, the moderator there, so just contact me there, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might wish to ask. Okay, so what happened is this particular, what the Anunnaki call a Lulu, or the primitive worker, this was a Bigfoot-type creature of which they manipulated to form their particular creature, or what is mentioned in the Genesis as the creature that the Elohim, the fallen angels, had brought into being, and that this particular being was not capable of communication, and of doing much more than menial tasks. Now, the Anunnaki did evolve this creature to the point where they were able to, that it was sort of human-like in that it did not have hair fully covering its body, and that its arms weren't necessarily as long as the Bigfoot-type creatures and the pre-Adamic creature that it was before their genetic experimentation, and also their direct intervention in that they mated directly with the creatures themselves, and that's another part of the story. So after the Anunnaki evolved this primitive worker through a series of genetic experimentations and trials in what they called the House of Life. And finally, what they did is they first took seed and put it into what was this ape woman. And it did not evolve to be the kind of creature that they wanted. So they finally impregnated or implanted, artificially inseminated their own, the supposed Anunnaki goddesses that had come to the earth to help, to serve as nurses to the other male Anunnaki and the other workers that were here. And so Ninharsag, which was the lady that was working with Enki to perform and conduct these experiments, she took it upon herself to artificially inseminate herself with this particular being, and she brought forth what was a creature that was a little bit more evolved. But still, this creature was not like the creative human, the civilized man, or the modern-day Adam and Eve that Yahweh Elohim created, as stated in Genesis. And so, even though they evolved this particular creature, the way that the Anunnaki talk about it in their story is that Enki and his vizier, they are out flying around in their craft, and then he says he spots these two women, these two creatures out in the wilderness. And Enki mates directly with them, and he says in the story that they give birth to the twins, or not twins, to two different children. One is named Adipa, and the other one is called Tiamat. One is male and the other was female. They're also called Dawn and Dusk. And it was these particular children that the story says later became what was called civilized man. But what the Anunnaki won't tell you is about the story of the Most High interceding and interdicting himself, and also judging the Anunnaki, and also destroying their culture and their civilization that they had created. And the Lord also, when he created Adam, he placed him into paradise. It was Enki that had to cause the deception and cause the fall. He's also known as Samael. And so, in the biblical story, we know that he entered into the garden in the form of the serpent, and that he seduced Eve and caused her to fall from grace. Now, this is going to lead into another question, and I'm going to go ahead and read this question, and then we'll go into the other biblical texts. And we've got plenty of time to cover a lot of texts, but these are two questions that are very important for me to clear up, and they are also somewhat advanced questions in that the people that are asking them have really done their homework and have had to look into these things to have insight and to be able to ask these particular things. And this particular question comes from Professor Truth, and he asked me this: it still remains unclear if Adam and Eve, light body, were the same being as the Adam and Eve that were fallen into dust. And I'm going to tell you, Professor Truth, yes, these were the same beings. They were just transformed. Their bodies were transformed from that of being clothed of light, or what they call being dressed in their light vestures, which simply means that they were bright-natured, that they were immortal, they were in an angelic state of being. And this was in the sixth day. This was prior to their fall, prior to their temptation, and prior to their being banished and kicked out of paradise. They were angelic. They were immortal, much like the other angelic beings. If they would not have fallen, they would have never have produced children. They would have never have entered into the flesh. We would have never have entered into the second world age. But the Lord knew that they were going to fall. He also knew that Lucifer was going to tempt them, that Enki or Samael or Satan, whatever you want to call him, was going to tempt them and cause them to fall into flesh. And that this would be a way for us to redeem ourselves as angels incarnating through flesh, and also as a way to condemn the fallen angels that are supposed to be ministering spirits unto humanity, but instead are utilizing and have abandoned their first estate and utilizing their authority above us to deceive and lead us astray, for which they will be judged. Okay, so continuing. Yes, Adam and Eve, when they lost their light natures, their bright natures, when they lost their immortality, it says in the text that on the 8th day they were transformed, their bodies were transformed into flesh. They were pushed out of paradise into the wilderness of the earth, and they realized then that they were in a fallen state, and that also that they were in a place surrounded by devils and demons where there was the harshness of the knowledge of good and evil, meaning that they would experience on this planet and while in the flesh the full summation, the full spectrum of good and evil, or pain and pleasure. And yes, it was after the 8th day and after their bodies have been transformed that it says that the archons came upon Adam and Eve and raped her and impregnated her with Cain. And this, after the 8th day, after they were already fallen, after they were already on the earth, this is when she became impregnated with Cain, and this is where all the prophecies of Genesis chapter 3 unfolded. Namely, that she would give birth to Cain, the firstborn son of the devil, and then she would also give birth to Abel, the firstborn son of Adam. There would be enmity between the seed of the woman, the seed of the serpent, and that it would be here also that they would be tried. And it would be here also that the Lord would come into the flesh exactly 5,500 years after Adam and Eve were kicked out of paradise, and that taking on the flesh, he would defeat death and show to us that he is the way and the truth and the life. And so, reading the rest of his question, it says, was there two false sins? We know that dust Eve sinned with Lucifer or Gadriel to produce Cain. But if Eve was raped after coming here, what was the first fall for them to have them leave their light body paradise? All right, the first fall was them eating of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. What this fruit was, we don't know. We don't know exactly what this fruit was. All we know is that the results of eating of this fruit was them losing their immortality and having to incarnate into the flesh. So that's the first fall. Them being tempted by Satan, serpent, Lucifer, the Nakash, to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. And eating of this tree caused them to lose their immortal bright nature, to fall into the flesh, where all of the prophecies of Genesis 3 would then be fulfilled. And all that happened here on the earth. And you asked about two falls. In fact, there was a fall, and then there was an elevation, or what I call an elevation. And there were two trees and two fruits. And the stories always repeat. always repeat. And just like the Lord said, as in the days of Noah, so shall I be. Same thing. The stories always the repeat. The Nephilim are returning. There is always, the cycles always repeat. History plays out that way. And so when Adam and Eve ate on the sixth day, ate of that fruit, they fell. On the eighth day, they ate of a different fruit. Talks about this in the Nag Hammadi codices. You can get all the quotes. Out of my book, out of my next book, the story is all there. It's been there forever. It's just been hidden and veiled. And most people just did not know how to put it together. And that one quote from On the Origin of the World that talks about the three atoms, and the first atom being, on the first day, and the second atom being the sixth day atom, and the third atom being the eighth day atom. You have to understand this as the skeleton key to unlock the fullness of the story. And so you'll get all those quotes. All right, so we're going to go ahead and go into the canon, to the different books. I'm going to talk about all the hidden books that you should, if you have time, and if you like to read the stories yourself, if you like to study the veiled stories, the hidden stories, the forbidden books, those ones that you're not talked about by the mainstream churches, or have ever been even heard of by your preachers and your pastors, we're going to get into that. First, we have to talk about the original canon. And when you study about the original canon, you'll find out that it, in fact, had 80 books, and that even the Catholic Bible currently includes a group of texts called the apocryphal texts, or the secret books. And I'm going to tell you what books these are as well. But one of the texts that is not mentioned is a book called The Shepherd of Hermas, which is an interesting read. But this book was one of the ones that was studied by the early church fathers and well known, and is not made mention of. And so the original canon, like I said, had 80 books, which included, in the Ethiopic canon and the Slavonic canon, they include the book of Enoch. So, now as far as the apocryphal texts include Tobit, Judith, additions to Esther, First Maccabees, Second Maccabees, the Wisdom of Sirach, Baruch, or the Letter of Jeremiah, additions to Daniel, Susanna, the Song of the Three Children, and a particular favorite of mine, Bel and the Dragon, which, if you study this particular text, it talks about serpent worship, ancient Babylonian serpent worship, and it even gives mention of a real live giant serpent that was worshipped in the days of Babylon. And so, interesting read. The other apocryphal text, first, 1 Esdras, 2nd Esdras, another one of my most favorite books, the Prayer of Manasseh, Psalm 151, 3rd Maccabees, 4th Maccabees, and then Odes. Included in, and you don't find this with all of them, but one of the other apocryphal books that I like to read that is not often included is the Wisdom of Solomon, which is an incredible book. It gives incredible insight into the Nakash during that particular time in the early church, and who the Hamites, the Canaanites, worshipped when they fell into bed, so to speak, with the fallen angels. And so those are some texts that are interesting for people to study and to read. Now, let's see. I have want to tell you about this as well. There's if you study like the Dead Sea Scrolls, this is a whole nother group of texts, and I'm not going to make indication of every one of those, because many people are aware of the Dead Sea Scrolls and their recent translation. Even though we don't have the fullness of the texts that were found, there are many that have been kept hidden away from us. But one thing that is of interest, you can look this up for yourself, is that there was a part of the Book of Enoch called that used to be part of the original text. It's called the Book of Giants, and it was found with the Dead Sea Scrolls. But what people don't know is that there are also Arabic and Manichaean texts which are related to the Book of Giants, and this will give you another reference for reading those particular texts. Then we have, as far as the Ethiopic text, because in that canon they include the Book of Enoch with their particular canon. Another book that is holy to the Ethiopic people is the Kebra Nagast, which is the Book of Kings, or the Glory of Kings, KebranaGast. And this book is similar to another text called the Cave of Treasures. Cave of Treasures. And the Cave of Treasures is another very interesting read. And both of these texts, the Cave of Treasures and the Kebra Nagast, they make mention of a time when Alexander ruled and how he went to war against these certain tribes, these giant tribes, the tribes of Magog. And so in the text it describes how Alexander prayed to the Lord to help him to confine these giant tribes, and Alexander talks about how he confound them in a place in the sides of the north, which is, according to the story, like the polar region, and how these two mountains were brought together and the Lord did this, brought these two mountains together to seal these beings up in their own place of inhabitation. And that once he did so, he told Alexander about a time when they would be loosed again. And so that is interesting for those that have studied the return of the giants or the return of the Nephilim. And so, let me see. Okay, let's go into some other texts here. All right, let's make mention of the Forbidden Books of Eden, or the Forgotten Books of Eden. This was published in 1926 by Rutherford Platt, Jr., and this was a collection of apocryphal and pseudepigraphal books which hadn't been necessarily put out and were not readily available to the public. But again, these include some of the apocryphal books But what is interesting about these particular texts is that they include other stories, like the Protevangelion of James and stories of the early childhood of Christ. They even include the second book of Enoch. And so I'm just going to read the names of the books that are in this particular text. And you can find this in book form on eBay, at Amazon. They're called the Forgotten Books of Eden. And they're really interesting because they include also the first and the second book of Adam and Eve, which, for those that have never read these particular texts, they give you insight into the first days that Adam and Eve are banished from paradise and placed on the wilderness of the earth. And they give you insight into how their bodies are transformed from that of a bright nature to that of a fallen state into flesh-bodied form. And those books also confirm the premise of what I've been telling you here. So, that particular book, the Forgotten Book of Eden, begins with the first and second book of Adam and Eve. It also contains the book of the Secrets of Enoch, another book called the Psalms of Solomon, another text called the Odes of Solomon, another called the Letter of Aristeas, the fourth book of Maccabees, which we know is a part of the Apocrypha, the story of Ahikar, the testaments of the 12 patriarchs, which is very interesting. The early patriarchs give you insight into the wars against the giants, and especially in the Testament of Judah, there is mention. And then the testaments of the 12 patriarchs are broken down into the individual testaments, which begin with Reuben, and then go to Simeon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, Asher, Joseph, and Benjamin. And basically they just tell you about their life growing up with their father and how it is that they ended up in Egypt, under the bondage of Egypt, and how Joseph ended up being Pharaoh, and how it was that the Lord allowed Israel to come at that time under the protection of Egypt, which was the most powerful nation, and how Joseph was elevated to that of second in command under Pharaoh. And it wasn't until a new Pharaoh came into place, and the deeds and the acts and all the things that Joseph did for Pharaoh, and in taking care of the kingdom through the lean and the fat years, and preparing for the 7 years of hardship, and how he made Pharaoh rich during that time and was able to care and cater to feeding the entire world because of the abundance that he had saved and the wisdom of his knowing what was coming. And so all of that is there. Those are interesting books. Now we're going to go into the Nag Hammadi codices. And these are a selection, a group of texts which many people have not read about. And these are the texts that have just been categorized and labeled as Gnostic and pretty much just written off as heresy. And it's my opinion that people don't really understand them at all. Because if you did, they fully in my opinion, support the Old and the New Testament, and they detract not in any way from them. And that really, it takes having an eye for truth to understand. And I'm not saying that every piece or every, I'm not saying it's all divine or inspired in any way at all. I'm just saying that it makes for very interesting reading, and it seems to lend credence to, well, there's a lot of information about the fallen angels in the Nag Hammadi codices, except that they are called the archons. They're called the archons in these texts. And these particular texts, in my opinion, give you insight further into the origins of the universe and the solar system and the fallen gods and how all that came into place, and than a lot of other texts. Again, that's just my opinion. So Codex 1 includes the prayer of the Apostle Paul, the Apocryphon of James, the Gospel of Truth, the Treatise on the Resurrection, and the Tripartite Tractate. Codex number 2 includes the Apocryphon of John, the long version, the Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Philip, the Hypostasis of the Archons, On the Origin of the World, which is one of my favorite books, the Exegesis on the Soul, and the Book of Thomas the Contender. Codex number 3 includes the Apocryphon of John, a shorter version, the Gospel of the Egyptians, Eunostus the Blessed, the Sophia of Jesus Christ, the Dialogue of the Savior. Codex number 4 includes another copy of the Apocryphon of John and another copy of the Gospel of the Egyptians. Codex number 5 finds another copy of Eunostus the Blessed, the Apocalypse of Paul, the first Apocalypse of James, the second Apocalypse of James, and the Apocalypse of Adam, which all of these texts are very interesting reading. What is another thing that is of interest about the Nag Hammadi codices is that they also confirm Cain as the child of the wicked one. And of course, for that information and for focus on that teaching, just start, take a look at my fourth book. It's easily found. Free copies are available. If you like one, email me. I'll be glad to send you a PDF copy. Not a problem at all. But the information is out there for you to study on your own. Codex number 6 includes the Acts of Peter and the 12 Apostles, the Thunder and Perfect Mind, authoritative teaching, the concept of our great power. All these are individual books. I guess I should stop in between. Let me just say this. The Acts of Peter and the 12 Apostles was one of the books. The Thunder of Perfect Mind, another book. Authoritative teaching, another book. The concept of our great power, another book. Plato's Republic even was found among these. The Discourse on the 8th and the 9th, another book. The Prayer of Thanksgiving, another book. Asclepius, another book. Codex number 7. The Paraphrase of Shem, another book. The Second Treatise on the Great Seth, another book. The Apocalypse of Peter, another. The Teachings of Sylvanus, another. The Three Stellas of Seth, Codex number 7. Zostrianos, another book. The Letter of Peter to Philip, Codex number 9. Melchizedek, another book. The Thought of Norea, who was supposedly a daughter of Eve, Adam and Eve. Another book, The Testimony of Truth. Codex number 10, Marsanes. Codex number 11, The Interpretation of Knowledge. Another book, A Valentinian Exposition. Another partial book, On the Anointing. Another, On the Baptism, A. On the Baptism, B. On the Eucharist, A. On the Eucharist, B. Allergenes, another book. I can't say this. Hypsiperon? I'm going to just spell it. It's spelled Hypsiprone. And if somebody can tell me how to say that, I would appreciate it. Well, anyway, see, these are all the books that were just recently found, 1946. 2 more codices, I should say. Codex number 12. The Sentences of Sextus, another book, The Gospel of Truth, and then Fragments. Codex number 13, this is the last one. Another copy on the Origin of the World, one of my favorites, and the Trimorphic Protonoia. All of these books are very interesting read. And some of them are, very short. Some of them are extensive, very lengthy. And all of them provide, in my opinion, just incredible insight into, especially if you study the periods and the times that they were supposedly written in, or that they, affected the church community, and how it was that the early church leaders and members, how they felt about and what they thought about certain books. And so, in my opinion, it's important, if you're a true student, a seeker of the truth, if you one of those individuals that wants to fill in the gaps, not with somebody else's hearsay or what somebody else believes or what somebody else said, but you want to study all the texts you can, so that in reading all of those texts you put the pieces together to fill in the gaps that have been left as blank. Because those stories are out there, those mythologies are out there. There's so many texts, so much information that has not trickled down to us, has not been made readily available to us. And yet, here we are, people, in this day and age where the Hopi, they prophesize about the spider that would have its web encircling the globe. And we have the internet. We have the internet and its capacity to access, to utilize the rituals of the net so that we can access all information, all knowledge, all traditions, forbidden secrets, things that have been long held away from us, in an instant, and pull up just so much information that we can't even get through all of it. That's how blessed we are to have access to all worlds right now, and to be able to tap into information from every part of the world that once had not been a possibility. And the Lord is making it really easy for us now. You cannot believe everything you read on the net, and I'm going to be the first one to tell you that. I'm also going to be the first one to tell you to believe nothing that you hear from others, including me. Believe nothing that I say. You have to do your own homework. You have to take this before the Lord in your own relationship and have Him discern all this for you in whatever way. That's the only real way. You cannot trust anybody. You can't trust people. And I'm going to tell you another thing, too, is you cannot trust all these supposed church authorities, these supposed new leaders, because there is organized criminality within even I don't know what you call this whatever it is, this movement of alternative Christian thought where people are coming to truth and discernment on the fallen angels, Nephilim, giants, New World Order conspiracy. I don't know what you call it, just waking up to truth. It's not a religion. It's just something that people share. And there are many, many more now every day being led by the Lord in their own individual way. And many of you are contacting me, and I appreciate that. And telling me your own stories and sharing with me your own testimony. And I appreciate that, and know that, it may take a little bit of time for me to get back with you, but I will, get back with each one of you. And that I appreciate you taking the time out to share your stories with me. Really, it uplifts me, and it confirms my own testimony and my own walk with the Lord, and that's a beautiful thing, because for those, well, you know how it is around your own families and around your own friends. There's not many people that are awakened to the truth. There's not many that have been blessed, and I'm not saying that in a facetious kind of way or in a belligerent or in a belittling kind of way. I'm just saying that, for the most part, most people don't care about truth. They have no concern for it, and want nothing to do with it. Care little about it. We are more focused on the entertainments and the distractions and the things of this world. Raising our families and leaving a legacy for our kids, accumulating stuff and junk and things like that, or succeeding in business or in our work worlds or in our there's so many distractions. There's so much that demands our attention. And there's so many things that people put first before the kingdom and before their relationship with the Father and the Son. And so it's easy to get led astray and to get caught up in all the distractions. But for those that are really, really dedicated to truth at all costs, that love the Father and love the Son above and beyond anything else, including family, spouse, children, friends. Now, if you love the Lord like that, if you have that kind of hunger for knowledge and truth, the Lord's going to lead you there. The Lord's going to lead you to your own discernment on all these things. And so here we have, in this day and age, people waking up all across the board, and we're just regular people. There's nothing uniquely special about, really all of us are special, but Why it is that the Lord chooses to stand up some people, we'll never know. We don't know how He works and how He chooses to work, or why it is that things unfold the way that they unfold. All we know is that, certain people are bringing forth truth and have been for a long time. And that's a beautiful blessing, because I believe that there's a remnant out there waking up to a lot of the secrets and that are putting together the puzzles. And if you put together the puzzle of truth, and if you can put together the profoundness of this discernment, it will change your life. It will change everything that you ever thought you knew, everything that you know about, what is coming even. That the knowledge of salvation, the knowledge of who our Lord and Savior is, of who Christ is, why He had to come into the flesh, is so very important, in my opinion, that it's our whole reason for being here. It's our whole reason for incarnating in the flesh, because we're on a soul salvage mission here ourselves. We are here to redeem and to salvage our own souls. Now, of course, we need Christ to do that for us. He is the way and the truth and the life, but it takes our own free will and effort to get to that point, to where we want to be born again and touched anew, and where we want to return to our first estate. So that's why it's important to study the book. All right, final thing. Let's go ahead and cover the pseudepigraphal books. The pseudepigraphal books are, again, another incredible compilation of texts which give incredible insight into all of the things that we've been talking about here. I'm going to start with the pseudepigraphal books include the books of Adam and Eve, the life of Adam and Eve, the apocalypse of Adam, the book of Adam, the second treatise of the great Seth, first Enoch, second Enoch, and there's also, for those that don't know, there's a third Enoch, or a Hebrew Enoch, the book of Melchizedek, the book of Abraham, the Testament of Abraham, the Apocalypse of Abraham, the story of Asenath. If you have not read that, it's an incredibly beautiful story. The story of Asenath talks about the Pharaoh's daughter, Asenath, becoming Joseph's wife, and how she did not want to marry Joseph, and how she didn't want to bow down to an idol, but the Lord came to her, and the angels came to her, and she became an approved bride for Joseph, and their love story is just incredible in this text. It's very, very powerful, and so I do recommend people read that one. For all you women that like Harlequin novels, read the story of Joseph and the Senate. It's very beautiful. The book of Moses, the revelation of Moses, the assumption of Moses, the martyrdom of Isaiah, the ascension of Isaiah, the revelation of Esdras, the book of Jubilees, the tales of the patriarchs, the letter of Aristeas, the book of the Apocalypse of Baruch, the Greek Apocalypse of Baruch, and fragments of a Zodakite work. Those are some of the pseudepigraphal texts. Now, there's also New Testament Apocrypha, and there's so much that there's even the Gnostic Bible, as I said, the Protevangelion of James, the infancy gospel, the gospel of the infancy of Jesus Christ. There's also the stories of Pseudo-Philo, the stories of Mary and her parents. There's so much out there that really, if you study all this and you take all this information into yourself, it's my opinion that you cannot help but have truth open up to you. Now, I'm going to make mention of two other books, too, for those that want to look into. Oh, I had to answer this question for Jeannie and my friend Daniel Johnson. They asked me about Sheol. Sheol is where we get our word for hell. And Sheol was a place that was made for humans that had sinned after falling into corruption and following the fallen angels. Now, the place of Tartarus was the original place of banishment, and that was a place of outer darkness. It was created for the fallen angels and their giant demigod children who rebelled against the Most High, or the Titans, the Olympians of old. And so that's why you have in the story of Dante and in the Inferno, you have the story of the giants being at the lowest level of hell, which is Tartarus. And so I had to make mention of that real quick. But anyways, to study more detail on Sheol and how this was a holding place of souls, you can go to two other books that I've not made mention of. Goodness, I'll have to do a follow-up on this. The Gospel of Nicodemus and the Gospel of Bartholomew. Both of them give you an account of Christ's descent into hell, how he broke open the gates of brass, how he took all of the souls of all of the patriarchs that were then gathered. Because before Christ died on the cross, nobody went to a resurrected life. They were all placed in Sheol in kind of like a place of confinement, a holding tank. All of the patriarchs were there together, gathered, waiting in a group for the Lord to come redeem and save them. And when they heard that Christ was about to die on the cross, Adam told his son Seth to tell the other patriarchs about the story that Christ had told him when he banished him from paradise. And so his son Seth then told the patriarchs that when Adam was kicked out of paradise, the Word, Yahushua, Savior, Messiah, told him that he would come into the flesh 5,500 years after Adam and Eve were banished from paradise, that he would assume the flesh, that he would take on the flesh himself, and that dying on the cross, he would defeat death, come into the place of Sheol, and take Adam up to the thief that died on the cross into paradise with him. This is what the Bible terms as the first resurrection. So, we've only got 2 minutes. I appreciate everybody. Yeah, okay, I'm so glad that I covered that. I just saw that Jeannie had asked me about Sheol. So, just so you know, Rand, yes, I will put links on the website. And Rand asked, so do people who die now go to paradise? Yes, they do. They go to paradise to be with the Lord. Because remember when he died, he said he goes to build us a place. He goes to build the Father's mansion, and that his is a mansion of many rooms. But anyway, so that's the story. And God bless all. I'll talk to you soon. We're going to cover more of the primitive worker this, like I said, this weekend, coming up Saturday. And with that, God bless all. May the Lord continue to lead you in discernment and bless your lives. Till Saturday.
A number of things that I've heard from people in the Pentagon, that the buzzword in the secret of secrets in the Pentagon is the Sumerian gods are returning, and that's what they're referring to, is that whole area. that Peter's.
Wow.
Can you repeat that again, just in case anybody missed it? The buzzword
in the Pentagon, and the military circles that are in the know about the cover-up here, they kind of, in whispered tones, talk about the return of the Sumerian gods. And they're talking about what we would call aliens or fallen angels returning into the Middle East, into Old Sumer area.
The Anunnaki.
Well, could be.
Under the other ancient names.
Do you think that has anything to do with why we're in a...
Good night, all.